Well, tonight's topic, for lack of a better name, I just called Now What, is mostly designed for people who are just wondering which direction to go. You know, if you've already got your book finished, or if you don't have your book finished and you're just kind of thinking about what's going on out there. We're going to be looking, this is not a discussion about how to write books. There are some of those coming up, which I would advise you to do if you've never been to any kind of training. It's amazing how much there is out there you just don't think about. But this is more about what do you do after it's written and you want to find out where to go from there. One of the things you have to ask yourself in order to address this is, why are you writing? Are you doing it because you want to be famous? You want to be the next James Patterson? Are you doing it because you want to make a bunch of money? Are you doing it because you like the idea of being an author, you know, going to book signings and all that sort of thing, which I know that is a rush? Do you want to do it because you want to walk in a store and see your book on the shelf? Some people, that's really important to them, and I like that. That was important to me. Is it for personal satisfaction? You just like to write, you know, and you just got, you know, things, you've done poetry, you've done a lot of different things, and you just enjoy writing. Or are you interested in different kinds of awards? Are you wanting that Pulitzer? Deciding the answers to these questions determines the direction really you need to take with publishing. And I do want to point out that it's not like you can only do one type of publishing. Right now, this is one of the most exciting times, I think, and I'm sure Kay agrees with me, in this business. When I first started, I sold my first book in 2009, and that has not been that long ago, really. We're talking 4 years. And in that amount of time, the whole industry has just flipped on its end. Everything is completely different. At that time, you basically had two choices. You either went with traditional publishing. We had three choices. Traditional publishing, vanity publishing, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, or not getting published at all. And that was it. You know, that was basically all there was out there. There were very few e-houses. There were a few, but people didn't really have e-readers. And then Kindle came along and changed the world, because they developed a reader where people could read digital books without lugging their computer around. Because up to that point, you literally had to take your laptop to read a book, and that kind of cuts it down like, ooh. So now you have a lot of options, and that's mostly what we're going to be looking at this evening. What are your options? And again, like I said, if you have any questions, jump in there. We have basically these different types of publications. We have mass market paperback, and these are the books that you guys are familiar with, the ones that most people read. And they're going to run anywhere up to $4 to $7, $8, something like that. The bigger stars charge more because people will pay it. By the way, the author has nothing to do with that. So if you go into a bookstore and you pick up a book and it's $27 and you're like, oh, that author's rich enough, the author didn't do that. Those prices are set by the publishing houses. The authors usually are pretty ticked about that themselves because that hurts their sales. You also have hardback books. This is the same book as this. This one was in was done in Czechoslovakia. And my first book was about a riverboat gambler on the Mississippi River. It's called Texas Hold'em. And when they sold it to the Czechoslovakian publisher, evidently they thought the Mississippi River looked a lot like an ocean. This is set in the 1890s. Doesn't that look like the 1890s? And the title they changed to Ace of Hearts. I don't know why. But anyway, the hardback books, of course, are usually done with authors that sell lots of books because they are more expensive. And they tend to run up into the 20s. And the average reader is not going to pay $22 for a hardback book from their author they've never heard of. They just won't do that, usually. So, unless it's something everybody's talking about. We also have what are called trades. And trades are a little bit bigger than a paperback. They're still paper, but they're a little larger size, and they're more expensive. They tend to run, this one I think was $14.99. I have a short story in that one. I don't know why they do these. I was racking my brain at home trying to think, because it's a paperback book that costs twice as much as the other size, so why they didn't. The only thing I can think of is that maybe you get more on the pages, so it's a little cheaper. But if it was cheaper in print, they wouldn't charge $12. I don't know. But anyway, the trade books can kind of be an issue. Digital books, electronic books, what you read on your Kindle or your laptop, and then of course the last ones, which are audiobooks. Of the ones up there, I've done everything except audiobook. And audiobooks tend to be, you know, any of you ever listen to audiobooks? These are kind of cool when you're traveling, and I think a lot of people like to check them out at the library because they're also pretty expensive. They're up in the 30s sometimes even for that. So those are the different kinds of publications, and we'll be referring back to those as we look at the pros and cons of the kind of publishing that you can get into. Computer, I was talking to you. There you go. Okay. You know what? I think I just skipped. Sorry. Okay. This one I've got on your handout. So if you want to kind of follow along. I didn't break them all down in the handout. I only have this one and self-publishing, because that seems to be the two things that most people are interested in. Traditional houses, sometimes referred to as New York, If you talk to authors that have been around a lot, they'll just say, oh, they went with New York. What they mean is it was one of the traditional publishing houses because they used to all be in New York. And so that was kind of the way that was differentiated them. There are examples like Penguin Putnam, Time Warner, Simon & Schuster, Random House. If you ask the average reader about a book that, what to name a publisher, they're going to name one of these. Harlequin, another example is Harlequin. The advantages of going with a traditional house is that you do get wide distribution. If you walk into a Walmart or any other bookstores that are left, I know there's some out there. Anyway, those are the books that you see on their shelves. Are going to be books usually with your bigger houses. There's also a certain amount of prestige to that. People like to, that's going to be the ones that are going to be able to go for the awards and things, are usually from your more traditional houses. And there's going to be a physical book, meaning you can hold it in your hand, as opposed to digital books, which you can't, unless you print them out yourself with CreateSpace or something. But that's an advantage to the traditional. Now, some disadvantages. First one here, well, let me look at some of these others I put on here, make sure I didn't go over something. Okay, disadvantages. Okay. Low royalty rates. Author has no control over anything, pretty much. Now, the bigger authors, the ones that have been around a while, that are selling jillions of books, they have some control. They can say, I don't like that cover, and the publishing house will say, okay. For those that are not at that status, you say you don't like your cover, and they'll go, and? They really don't care if you like your cover or not. That's your cover, you got it. It can take a long time to get published, meaning once they buy your book, right now, the time is around 18 months. About how long was yours?
They have holes in their schedule, so I'm only like 6 months.
Oh, good. That's unusual. Lots of times they'll be as much. So you sell your book to a New York house, and it might be a year and a half before it actually gets to the shelf, which makes you crazy when you're sitting there waiting. You want to tell everybody. Okay, small royalties. Most of the New York houses for print books, 12 to 15% is really good, pretty good. Mine, when I went with my little New York house, Dorchester Publishing, where my first 2 releases were printed, they were the oldest mass market paperback publishers in the country. They've been around for 25 years. They didn't survive the depression that we just went through, the recession we just went through. So anyway, my royalties were 4%. That means every book that's sold, I got 23 cents. That's not a lot of money. And that's pretty typical. A lot of houses will pay a lower percentage like that. We're going to talk about some of the other publishings that do much better. But 80% of authors need a day job because of that. And a lot of people think, oh, if I write a book, I'm going to be rich. 80% of authors still work because they don't make enough money. I'm talking published authors. Do not make enough money off of their books to quit their job. So what we always hear about, though, are those few that do, right? You hear about the ones that wrote Twilight and Harry Potter and all those, and they've got so much money they don't know what to do with it, and they're throwing it around on the streets. And they're rare. That's why you hear about them. If everybody was doing that, we wouldn't talk about it. It would just be the way it is. Some other things against going with traditional publishing. One thing, it's very difficult to get into a New York house. They are, for a long time, they were the only show in town, so they can be extremely picky. Now that there's so many other things popping up, they're actually getting a little nervous, but it's still really hard to get into a New York house. Because what they're doing is, because of the competition, they're even cutting back on their lines. A lot of the houses, and when a house puts out, okay, we take somebody, like maybe Penguin Putnam has Berkeley, for instance. And Berkeley Publishing does a lot of romance novels and that sort of thing. Okay, and they might have a standard, and I'm making these numbers up, but just giving you an idea. They may have a standard where they release like 5 cozy mysteries a month, and they might release 2 historical romances, and they might release 7 suspenses or whatever. They have those slates, and like she was talking about, she had a spot that opened luckily at Harlequin, which means an author didn't get their book in on time, and they're going to put her in their spot, which will happen. If you don't hit your deadline, they'll put somebody else in your place, and who knows when your next time's going to come up. A lot of those houses now have cut back. So instead of releasing 7 cozy mysteries or suspenses, they're now only releasing 4. And so what that does, that's one of the reasons why it takes 18 months to get on the shelf. Because the books that they're getting, that's before they get that next slot opened up. So it has dramatically changed. When I first sold my first book, I was on the shelf within 8 months. And that's, like I said, that's only been 4 years ago. Times has changed. One of the other problems with the traditional publishing is that many of these houses right here require an agent. They will not even read your stuff if you don't have an agent. And I'm going to show you one of their websites here in just a few minutes if I can get it to work right. I mentioned the author has very little control. After the book goes to press, it's permanent. And this might be something that you'd be thinking, duh. But with digital, that's not the case. If you release a book, if you self-publish a book, and you decide that you want to write a series based on it, and you'd like to add a character back in that book that's already published, you can do it. You can go back and you can alter it, and you can reload it, and you can do it. With a print book, of course, that's not going to happen. The books are on the shelf for a limited time. This is something else that a lot of readers don't realize. But when you release a book, someone like myself, like I said, who was not a superstar in this at all, my books were on the shelf 3 or 4 months. And then after that, they take them back off because they got to put up the new ones coming in. So it's not, I have people all the time that ask me, can I get your book down at, Barnes & Noble or whatever? And I said, well, no, not now. Because that was 4 years ago that it was out. You can get them off Amazon still. You're going to get the paper copies off Amazon. But they're limited. The amount of time they're on the shelf is limited. You have a window, very skinny window to make it or break it. And if they don't sell in that window, they jerk them back off. They rip the cover off, which is very heartbreaking, but they rip the covers off. They send the covers back to the publishing house, and then they get credit for that, the bookstores do or whatever. So, and then they burn your books. My babies. Okay, books spend a long time in production, I already mentioned that. And the house gets to decide what's going to get published. In other words, if the editors don't like what you're writing with this particular situation, then it doesn't get, nobody sees it. So that's definitely, they are the gatekeepers. They get to decide, used to get to decide what people are going to read. Now I'm going to grab one of those papers off that box right there. Okay. The small press is a term that we often use that refers to electronic publishers and digital books. Most will produce paperbacks if the book sells well in, say, like a 6-month period, that they'll come out with a paperback at that time. Unfortunately, they also usually put them out in trade. So I have a lot of friends who've published electronically, and yes, their book eventually comes out, but it's priced at $14 or whatever, and so they just don't sell real well, as a rule. And correct me if I'm wrong, but as a rule, that's normally the way that works. One of the, let's see, I don't have this on the paper this sentence. So some examples of digital press, Sam Hain and Laura's Cave, name some for me. I know some of you guys are out here familiar.
Entangled?
Yeah, Entangled. But there are lots of these houses that have sprung up since the Kindle was invented. The Kindle is what changed everything dramatically. Disadvantages, I guess hit advantages. It is easier to get into a digital house. They're going to be more willing to take a chance on you because it doesn't cost that much to put your book in production. If they take another a paperback book, is going to have to be printed and stored and shipped and all this sort of stuff. And so they don't usually take a chance on that. Can you not get that thing to turn off? That's my husband. Ask your mouse to turn off, there's something with my husband. Let's see. One of the advantages, though, to them as well is that they do provide your editing and your cover. If you're self-pubbing, you've got to do that yourself. So if you are wanting to get your feet wet, you want to work with an editor, you want to get started, you don't want to lay the outlay as far as hiring editors and hiring covers, then digital press might be the way for you to go. And because they will take care of that. Disadvantages. As an author, you're still doing about all your promo. A lot of people also mistakenly think that when you sell a book, the publishing house just throws you apart. Because that's what they show on TV. They've got this person that's, they've got these launch parties and all that's hooey. That only happens if you were an astronaut or something and you've written a book, then yes, they'll do that for you. Then they don't even need that. But the average author, no, that doesn't happen. And so you're doing your own promo. They also will give 25 to 30%, 5% royalties. That's kind of standard with small press. And that's more than that 4%, that I got online. Unfortunately, the sales are usually very big. And there are some people that hit it great in digital. I mean, these are the ones that write books like 50 Shades of Grey, and she's not going to go hungry again. So, but that's the exception. That's not the rule. And I think that typically people who publish this route make maybe $500 a year from their book. You're nodding. Okay, I'm glad I hit that right. So again, if you're thinking, oh, I want to get rich, this may not be your route. But you can certainly think of it as a stepping stone. This isn't going to happen overnight anyway. The print books are usually, I mentioned that, trade, and they don't really have to reroute, this author out too much as a rule. Vanity press is something I think is going to die out very quickly now that we have invented self-pubbing. Vanity Press used to be something that anybody could get their work published because they picked up anything. An example, this is Publish America. If you've ever heard of that, look it up sometime. It does have a place for people who, say for instance you were a speaker and you went around the country speaking on some phenomenal, I don't know what. And if you've ever been to those kind of conferences and stuff, you know that they always stop during the middle of presentations and then you can buy books that the author wrote, that kind of thing. And they're usually how-to books, you know, how to make $1 jillion by selling books at conferences. But anyway, and it works for them. You know, they've got their own outlet, but these books are not in bookstores, okay? You're not going to walk in a bookstore and see these in the bookstore. That's not going to happen. But they are good if you have that outlet. If you have a way of selling yourself, then they're fine. Disadvantages, they can be expensive. And like I said, I really think this is going to die out very quickly now that people can do their own deal on Amazon or Create Space and you not have to skip these guys. And unfortunately, they're often a scam. Authors will send query letters to these people. They always love your book. Oh my gosh, this is wonderful. And then we need $500 to get the production started. And so the author mails them $500. Oh, this is great. Okay, we got to get a cover for you, but if you could just help put a little up front on that cover, you know, just $1,000. And then we can get your distribution started. So the author sends them $1,000. And then they say, listen, I tell you what, if you really want to make money, you need to order you a bunch of these books and go out and start promoting it. Or you need to buy our packet, which tells you how to promote your book. It's only $500. They make their money off the author. And a lot of people get burned on these. And that's why I put this asterisk right here. Money should always go to the author. If you are dealing with any agent or publishing house that says, well, if you'll just give us, run, it's a scam. It's a scam. Now, there are ways that you can, there are people that are book doctors, but they'll tell you straight up, you know, yes, I'll edit your book for X number of dollars. That's different. You're hiring them. But if they claim to be an agent or a publishing house and they charge you money, it's a scam. I don't think I can be more blunt than that. I just know people who've fallen for this, and it always breaks my heart. Because then they end up with 500 books that they couldn't sell, you know, to line the dog's cage. Okay, indie publishing. This is probably why most of you are here tonight. I'm Bessie. If you will look at the next sheet on your paper, I broke down some of the pros and cons for publishing, independent publishing, sometimes called self-publishing. This is where the author publishes their own book. And you can do this through Amazon, Smashwords, iTunes. There's all kinds of things coming out with this now. I just saw today, actually, where Barnes & Noble is now coming up with a platform that will let you publish like Amazon, which one of the problems has been up to this point with Barnes & Noble is really clumsy to try to get your books in there. You pretty much have to go through another thing. But they've decided to start getting Amazon's Pocket, which I think was somebody finally figured that out. But they're going to have a little bit different percentages on the royalties and everything, but still it's going to open up the nook quite a bit. These are predominantly digital books. However, there is a program called Create Space, which you can get through Amazon, where you can actually have paperbacks. And what you do with that, they're called PODs, or print on demands. And what that means is when the person orders the book, it's printed at that time and sent to them. PODs are also, they're kind of expensive. To put together a regular paperback book, just, you know, like these little mass market deals, it costs the author about $10 just to make the book. Oh, what? Tell me more.
I haven't had one more than 5.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, how many pages?
350.
Then they got good. Okay, that's good to know. I haven't done Create Space, but I know I was talking to Kelly.
These retail for 10.
All 3 of them? And you did that to Create Space?
Uh-huh.
Oh, very good. Very good. Do you care? Do you care to pass it around what people do? Yeah. Okay, that would be good. This is something that you can set up yourself. One of the downsides of Create Space, though, is that you do have to have your cover. When you do a cover artist, it has to go all the way around the book. So it's a little bit more expensive sometimes for your covers. But yeah, she's got some there. She can pass them around so they can see the quality. They're usually very
Those
good.
are all done by Create Space.
Good. Thank you. The advantages of self-publishing, let's look at our sheet here. We can go through these. If you sell your book at $2.99 or above on Amazon, you get 70% royalties. So that means for a book that's about $3, you know, or I sell mine at $3.99, so close to $4. I make $3 for every book. I made 23 cents for those other people. So even though you don't sell as many, you don't need to. Author has total control content, covers, pricing, and this is a big one that a lot of people don't realize. You can do a lot with pricing, running specials and things like that, get people interested in your book, you know, and you can't do that unless you're the publisher, unless you're the one that's in charge of that. That's not going to happen. You can, and it's not hard to change the prices for promos and things like that. You don't have any deadlines. You know, for a lot of authors, I don't have that up there, I'm going off this sheet because it's a little more detailed. Deadlines are a pain. You know, if you have life, it's going on, you've got a publisher that's waiting on a book, and all of a sudden you have an illness in the family, or you know, something happens and you can't get it done, then they don't like that. And they will bump somebody else in your slot, or you know, if you do that too many times, they'll just release you. So there's no pressure with self-publishing, and because you don't have any deadlines. The other thing that's really important, remember I told you that for average author, their books are on the shelves about 3 or 4 months, and that's about it. With indie pubbing, it's there forever. You put up a book, it's always there. And when you put out your next book, and this is something that's really cool that happens, and I think I've got that, oh, the next one, Phoenix about. Every book you release, if someone likes that one, they go back and buy all of them. And then you release another one, if they like it, they buy all of them. You know, the next one buys all of them. So but the fact that the books are always available, they always continue to sell. And the more you put out, then it starts growing behind it, if you follow what I'm saying. So you can build a readership pretty easily because the books are available for them. They can get to them. A book can be successful in indie land, I just figured that was better than Disney World, with far fewer sales than a New York book. For example, if an author writes a book for a New York house and it only sells 10,000 copies, the author will not even earn back their advance. The average advance is about $5 grand. And I think it's coming down even more now. People used to get nice advances for 10, 15,000, and they're like, phew. But anyway, 10,000 books would be considered a loser, all right? In indie land, if you released a book and sold 10,000 copies at $3.99, you made 30 grand. As an author, you made 30 grand. And most authors would not consider that bad. You know, that's probably something they like to spend. So there is a lot less pressure as far as book numbers because you have so much more to make an author do. Another thing that's good is that authors can sell. You can release books quickly. Remember I said that it takes about 18 months to get a book on the shelf if you're going traditional? Now, most houses are somewhere around that time anyway. If you're writing your books independently, you can release one a week if you want to. As soon as it takes about, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes to upload. And that's it, it's live. Well, it goes live in 24 hours usually. But this is also something that works very well for niche books, books that New York doesn't want. 50 Shades of Grey started out as, I think it was in a small press. Anybody know the details on that? I think it was small press. Before it was bought, was she indie?
It was online, and it was a parody of Twilight.
I knew it was, yeah. But she, so originally, I guess technically she was self-published,
Yeah.
and then it went from there. But nobody was interested in that, you know. So sometimes you get books that the publishers say, oh, that won't sell, and they're wrong. You know, they can be wrong. The author, and I mentioned a little bit ago about the fact that you can actually change a book after it's already been published. And sometimes you'll notice, like you go back and read it, and you find some typos that were not there when you uploaded. But when you read it on your Kindle, they jump in there from somehow, I don't know how that happens, and you're like, oh my gosh, we're not trying to, you can fix it, and you can re-upload. And Amazon will even send a notification to the people who've already bought the book if they want to upload a new version for free. The author can do what, I like this. I don't know if you do this too, Kate, probably. Author can do whatever she wants as far as at the end of your book, if you want to put your link to Facebook and you want to put your Twitter handle, and you can do that. New York will not let you do that. You can put, they'll put your website in, and maybe some of them now let you put Facebook in, but they didn't used to. But something I did, I had a book that was selling pretty well. It's a psychic suspense called Medium Well Done. And I had another little book that I had out that it wasn't selling. It was a time travel. People don't like time travel, so I didn't want to put it up, but it was free to load it up, so I did it anyway. Took the first 2 chapters of that one, stuck it at the end of Medium Well Done, uploaded it. Guess what? People started reading that. They got done with Medium Well Done. They read the first 2 chapters of Kimberly's Devil, my second, and they started buying it. It was the first in the series, so the second in the series started selling. But those are the things that you can do that you don't have the luxury of doing if you're traditionally published. It's your baby. Now for the downside. Lower sales. Most indie authors sell fewer than 100 copies of their book. I want to repeat that because it's really important. So many people think they're going to just indie pub and they're going to get rich, put the kids through college, head to Caribbean, but that's not the way it works. I know, Kay, you've got some indie books out right now. I do too. But see, we both started out traditional. We already have a fan base. And many of the authors who are making big money in self-publishing are actually traditional authors that have moved over. So when you hear those big numbers, keep that in mind. If you're thinking you're going to get rich, you might. You might have 50 shades of pistachio lined up there. I don't know. But as a rule, don't quit your day job. Don't walk in and tell off your boss just yet. One of the problems is you must also hire your own editor, your own cover artist, unless you can do that. If you are very talented, I know authors that make their own covers. I know authors that trade back and forth with friends. They edit each other's books. There are ways to get around that. But generally speaking, you can expect about $1,000 in production. About. Would you agree with that, Kay? Did you hire somebody else to do your editing, or did you do your own editing?
I hired someone to do editing.
What, do you mind if I ask how much it costs you to get them ready for production?
I mean, I've done short to long, and it's been anywhere from $40 to, I think, $400.
For editing?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you're editing. But you can easily, and some of the editors, there are a lot of New York editors are now freelancing on this because they can make a lot of money on the side because the houses don't pay them well either. And some of them will charge as much as $5,000 to edit. So if you're thinking about that, you want to hire an editor, shop around. I think the prices are starting to come down now too because there's more competition that always brings the price down. But you will have probably some outlay. It's very easy for an author to get lost in the crowd. There are now 2 million, last I heard, it's probably on that now, 2 million books on Amazon. Now, when you buy a book from an author you've never heard of, what makes you do that? What's the key that makes you buy a book if you've never heard of the author before?
Cover.
Cover.
The cover in the back. Yeah.
Anything else? The number one thing that sells books is word of mouth. A friend tells you, oh, I love this author. I just bought 2 books this week because somebody told me, I love this author, so I'm worrying about that. Okay, so word of mouth, that's the best thing you can do. If you're one among 2 million books, kind of hard to yell above that crowd. And the other problem is you guys said, oh, well, you walk through the store. You pick it up, you look at the cover, you flip through the back. Next thing authors do, or readers do, is read page 1. That's just a standard rule. Front, back, page 1. If they like it, they buy the book. How are they going to do that when you're digital? Now, granted, you can read most of the books now. They let you, Amazon has where you can read like the first 10 or 15 pages. But how are they going to find it? They have to either be looking for you specifically, or the subject, like they type in suspense books, and they all roll up. And then they're sort of scrolling down that page to look for a picture that attracts or a title that attracts their attention. And that's one of the drawbacks. It's very, very hard to get found on the internet. It really is. Many authors are releasing books that really just aren't ready. And one of the problems with that is, if you've got a book and you want to see what's going to happen, what I always tell people is to release it in a pen name that you don't care if you never use again. Because if the sales are terrible, then you can forget that you ever knew that person. And the next one you release in a different name, so that people don't say, oh, I remember that, I read her, it was all, So if you want to try it, it's free to upload, but keep that in mind. Now, if you've written several books, if you've written 7 or 8 books, and you've been winning contests, or you've had editors that were interested but just maybe didn't grab it, then yeah, you might be worth that risk. But otherwise, you want to think really twice about that. It's not possible to do a lot of different kinds of promotion with digital books. You can't do book signing. Things like that are very hard. Amazon has come up with ways you can sign a Kindle, so you can send a Kindle signature to somebody with your book. I've never really figured out how to do that. But I just think the average reader probably wouldn't be real thrilled about that. Oh, there's a printed picture of your signature. That doesn't, to me, that doesn't seem like something most people would stand in line for. But it is hard to do different kinds of promotions on there. Some feel it's causing book prices to drop. There's been a lot of talk about this lately, where people are kind of getting used to the fact that they can get books for free now. And so because of that, it's causing the prices of all books are having to start to come down a lot more. And so there are a lot of people in the industry that are concerned that letting authors price their books might actually end up pricing their own job. Because there are people out there that are just thinking, well, I might pay for a book, I didn't. You know, so they just kind of just do their own thing. And again, your author must do all the promotion, and that takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time. So, that's kind of an overview. The question we have to have now is, what then is right for you? Bookstores and book signings and all that are going to require a physical book. If you do a Create Space book, you'll have a physical book, but it won't be in a bookstore, okay, as a rule. Self-published books, they don't carry in bookstores. And I've heard authors get mad, why don't they do, you know? Well, there's 2 million books. You know, how many bookstores can hold that? That's just on Amazon like right now. So they can't just put every single book in the bookstore. They can't. They cannot physically do that. And so if you want to get in a bookstore, if that's your goal, then you're going to probably want to target the traditional press. And some of the small presses, I think, have been able to get their books into bookstores. Some of the bigger small presses. That's an oxymoron. Okay, but anyway, they've been able to pull it off. But as a rule, you're not going to be able to pull it off indie. If money is important, however, you might want to go indie. These are some of my indie titles. And you notice Eliza Jane? That's because I threw them out there, didn't know if they were going to work or not. And so I didn't want anybody to know about them. And now I just told you. Actually, they're my best sellers. Go figure. So, you know, that's just something you have to think about. And like I said, you can do all these things. Now, let's say that you've decided you want to go to a publishing house. You want to at least start with traditional. And I think most authors do. They usually start big and then, you know, make adjustments as they need to. If that's the case, you're going to need to learn how to write a query letter if you haven't already. And I've got a sample query to staple on the back of the set of papers here. And we'll talk about queries a little bit more in just a minute. The query letter is basically a one-page letter that gives the basics for your book, and it is extremely important. A lot of authors kind of slop over it because they think, oh, it's the pages that matter. Yeah, it is. But if they don't look at the pages, then the query letter kind of matters, because that's what's going to make them decide whether or not they want to look at the pages. So query letters are extremely important. If you want to have also get into a big house, you're probably going to need an agent, not always, but some houses don't require agents, but a lot of them do. And so you do the same thing. You want an agent, you also do a query letter. It's the same process. Yeah, I just said that. Okay, finding agents and houses on websites, it's easy. One I always liked was Predators and Editors, and yes, I know that it's misspelled. They did that intentionally, Predators, because it kind of rhymed with editors. Okay, let me see if I can get this hyperlink to work, because I'll show you what this site looks like. Cannot locate. Oh, okay, we don't have a server for that. Okay, or I'm not online, I guess, maybe. Anyway, Editors and Predators, pred-ed.com/ has just about every editor in the world and all the agents that are pretty much out there, and you can, they're ranked. They've got warning signs to those that have been, you know, like some agents get sued. When you sell a book, your money goes to your agent, and your agent sends you your money. So there are some agents out there, believe it or not, that steal from their authors. But anyway, this site puts up warnings. There'll be a big red thing, and they'll usually say why they've got the warning. Some agents have been known, for instance, to charge for a read. Oh yeah, we'll read your book if you'll pay us $50, whatever. And that's, like I said before, that's not enough. If you've got a good book, they'll pay you. But that's, that site will tell you that. And they'll also tell you things like whether or not an agent has actually sold books. Because there are a lot of people who are agents who have never sold a book. They just put a sign out that said agent. And so if you go on there, there'll be a $sign. And now that doesn't mean if there's no $sign that agent hasn't sold, not at all. But it means that there has been a report to this site that this agent did sell. So it's a good place to kind of check them out. And there's usually links. So you can go straight to the page of that particular agent or publishing house or whatever you're looking for, and it shows you how to submit your work. Another thing that you can do is go to bookstores and see who's publishing the type of book that you're writing. If you're writing fantasy novels, if you're writing, what's that, Game of Thrones, is that what it's called? Yeah. Those kinds of books, then pick one up on the shelf and see who publishes it. It's written right there on the spine. Take a little notepad, go to the bookstore and take notes, and write down every house that's publishing the kind of book you are writing. And then get on the internet, go to their websites and see what they want. The submission guidelines are usually listed right there. You have to look around for them a little bit. Sometimes there'll be a little, down at the very bottom, they'll say for authors, and you have to click on that. Or it'll say submission guidelines, and you click on that. You will find, however, that most of the bigger houses will say, we will only read your material if it comes from an agent. You can send it to them, they literally will throw it in the trash can. They won't even send it back to you. So you want to be careful that you read what they're wanting. Never send your work to somebody who doesn't represent or sell what you write. You know, I mean, it tells you right on their site. They'll say, I hoped I had a hyperlink here. So like, for instance, my agent's site. It lists all the books they're looking for right now. We're looking for this kind, this kind, this kind, this kind, this kind. And then you can go to the individual agents. There's 5 agents in that house. And see what they want. Because different agents represent different kinds of books. Some agents like sci-fi. Some hate it. They don't want to represent sci-fi. They're not good at it. And they don't have connections. Some of them will represent, maybe they want to represent like history books, nonfiction, children's books, something like that. So do your homework. Nothing makes agents crazier than getting a query letter on something that they don't even represent. You know, because it tells them the author didn't care enough to even look it up. So why should I care enough to read their book? And they won't. They'll throw it away. They get thousands every year. So they can throw yours away. They won't. And you know, you want to, this was my hyperlinks. Oh, anyway, the first one to Simon & Schuster was basically a page that said, we will not read your work unless it comes to us from a literary agent. We will not represent a literary agent. You can do that by going online and move it up. So it's just to prove that. And then Marshall Lyons Literary Agency is my agent. Okay, query letters. There are basic things you want in a query letter. You look at this first page here. You notice how the one that I printed out for you is all on one page. You notice how visually it's broken up. You see that? Okay. You do not want them to open up your letter and go, oh my gosh, I don't want to read all that. You never want them to start with that attitude. It should look attractive, physically look attractive. We have the very first thing. This was a sample query letter that I wrote for my first book that I sold. And first thing would be Dear Ms. or agent or editor, whatever the name is. And you never call them by their first name. Even if you know them, even if you've met them in a conference, sat down and had dinner with them, you don't call them by their first name because it's a business letter, okay? It's not a chummy letter. So you always use the proper salutation and always spell it right. Another thing agents always complain about at conferences all the time. They didn't even look up how to spell my name. You know, so do a little bit of homework. First paragraph is usually your hook, your genre, your page count. You notice in my sample here I've got, as if Lottie Mace's life hasn't been bad enough since the Yankees won the war, now a blackmailer is threatening to send her ailing father to prison in my newest 90,000-word historical romance, Texas Hold'em. Okay, so you notice it's how long it is, what the genre is, the title's all caps. And the reason you want your title all caps is because you want that to jump out at them and stick in their little brain, that they know the title of that book. First, the next couple of paragraphs, I'm not going to read these to you, the next couple of paragraphs give you a summary of the story, including the goals, motivations, and conflicts of the characters involved, and you can read through the samples I have here. You'll also notice later when you read that I did not tell the end of the book. You don't do that in a query letter. That's a synopsis. You have to tell the end of the synopsis. But in a query letter, you want to get their interest. You want them to read that and think, ooh, I wonder what happens. Because then they'll say, send me the rest of that. You know. And that's what you want. You want them to say, send me the rest of that. The final paragraph, then you want to put in some of your information about yourself, your writing credentials, and I thought this was an old one. I've got here, I'm a pro member of Romance Writers of America, and all that sort of stuff, what organizations I belong to, writing organizations. I don't do query letters anymore now because I'm an agent, and so she takes care of that for me. But if I kicked my agent to the curb, which I've done that for 2 of you, that's another story, then I would say I was a published author with so-and-so, I had this many, you know, put that in there. So whatever your credentials are, you want to put that there. Never ever say that the book has been rejected already. Some authors are kind of tempted in this situation to go, everybody's turning it down, but this is really a good book. You'd be surprised. You want to read something really funny. There is a website, a blog page, where you can't make responses on it. It's from a literary agent in New York. No one knows, well, somebody knows who it is, but I don't know who it is. But anyway, it's called Slush Pile Hell. And he pulls out little blurbs of things people have put in query letters and then writes a smart aleck. He doesn't actually say that back to the person in person, but some of them are crazy. I mean, you just think, how are these people doing? Like, I'm going to make you rich. If you'll just, it's like, oh, good. I'm playing you for after. Okay, if it's an email query, and nowadays, very ending. The ending, you want your name, you want your address, you want your phone number, you want your email. You want every way that they can get a hold of you that they can. You want to make sure that they don't get to that point and be like, because that happens sometimes too. People send a query letter and don't even have it signed. And you know, they pitch the envelope aside, and they're reading through, and they're like, where'd that come from? But anyway, don't do that. Notice that in my query letter, that you can see the title of my book 3 times. You see that? The very last paragraph has my title of my book one more time. That's because by the end of that letter, I want them to remember the title of my book. Because when I send them, if they ask for paper submission, which very few of them do that now, but if they did, or if you send it to them, like they ask for you to send it as an attachment, and put your title of your book in the, you want that to jump out when they see the submission. Oh, that's that book, yeah. You know, so you want to have your title. That's one of the reasons you want it in all caps, is so that it really stands out. If you're doing an email query, and this is the way like 90% of the houses work now, that's happened just since I've been publishing. At the very end, I would suggest, right before they sincerely say, I have included the first 3 pages or whatever of my manuscript in case you want to take a quick peek. But you not do it as an attachment. It comes after your signature because they will not open an attachment if they don't request it because they can get viruses that way. So it has to be, you know, they will read it. If they've gotten that far and all they got to do is scroll a little bit more, they will read those few pages. Make sure they're really good pages. And make sure they end where they want to read more. Okay? So you don't just stop at the middle of the paragraph. And yes, people do that too. So you want to get to a point that they're like, oh, you know, and they'll say, send me that, send me that. And that's, now, one of the things too, I think a lot of people wonder about is, do you need an agent? You know, why did you go with an agent? Agents can get your work in front of an editor much more quickly than you can, much more quickly. My first book that sold, I had sent query, at that time, Dorchester requested with a query the first 3 chapters. They said, go ahead and send that with your query. It was all done the old-fashioned way, snail mail. It sat on my editor's desk for 1.5 years before she looked at it. 1.5 years. And she bought it. So it wasn't she didn't like it, but she was busy, there were other things going on. I can go through my agent now, and that's typical. You know, you were saying they told you 3 to 6 months. Of course, that's with an agent.
I apologize for being late.
That's quite all right, come in. There's the papers there on that box if you want to grab one. It's got some of the things we want. The agent I'm with now, when I release a manuscript to her, she will have it on 6 or 8 editors' desks within 24 hours. And that's why you want an agent. If you've got a good agent, they've got their connections. I will get back my results. Sometimes 48 hours I'll have back a result. And that just doesn't happen without agents, generally speaking. So that's why a lot of people go that route. But it's also something, and you were asked this earlier, you sent out a query letter this morning, which is awesome. I would recommend that tonight when you go home, find at least 6 other agents you'd like to have and send them one right now. And here's why. If you don't, you're going to be 137 before you get an agent. Because they're slow. They're so slow. So what I always tell people, and I was the queen of query letters, I was rejected 45 times before I got my first agent. 45 times. That's not too unusual. So what you do though is you send out like 6 of them. I would send out 6 every Friday. Now if we're doing it electronically, often I would have response back within 24 hours. Some of them, you know, you'll get it back just, oh yeah, I'd like to see it, or no, that's not right for us. And every time I got a response back, I sent out another query. Even if they were asking to see the manuscript, I still sent out another query. And my theory on that was, if you're going fishing, who's going to catch the most fish? The one that has 6 lines in the water, or the one that just has 1? And even if you get a hook, even if they say, I want to see your book, that doesn't mean you've landed them yet. So I always did that. I got an agent fairly quickly. You know, I have an agent within like 1 year. And I have a lot of friends who've been querying now for 10 years and still don't have agents. So, and that's the only reason. In 10 years, they've sent out like 8. I'm like, I sent out 45 in a year and a half. You know, what are you doing up there? But that's, you can't overdo that. Just send them out. Go through, make yourself a list of who you would like to have. Start with the best one, your primary agent. My idea was I could always take a rejection from them just as well as I could the next guy. No's a no. So I started at the top of my pile and came down. And I have had 3 agents with my first 2 months. But I love the agent I got now. All right, question and answer time. That's my granddaughter. I love that picture. She's 4 now. Someday I'm going to show it to her when she goes to prom, and we'll show it like to her. But anyway, questions? Anything I can help with after throwing an answer? Sure.
You said that it's important not to put your book out there before it's ready.
Right.
How do you know when your book is ready?
That's a good question. And that varies. One thing is to submit it to some agents and see if they bite. You know, if you send it because it's free, You know, you send it out there, and if they come back, and you can tell the kind of rejection letter you get. Like I said, I had quite a few. There's form rejections. Dear author, sorry for this form rejection, but so many we cannot possibly answer in person, yada, yada, yada. Your book was not right for us at this time, but keep writing. Okay, that's just the standard. They just, you know. And sometimes that's because that first paragraph. You know, if you query somebody with erotica and it's a Christian publishing house, and yes, that does happen. That somebody didn't do their homework. They saw the word publisher. Oh, I'll send them in. Yeah. So sometimes that's what causes the rejection. The better you get, the more personal your rejections become. I know it sounds crazy, but you'll get to where they'll start saying, "Dear Lisa, thank you so much for sending this to us." And then they might say, "You know, while I liked this and this, I didn't like this or that." Then the best rejections are the one that say, you know, personal things. If you would consider rewriting, I'll look at it again. And then you're close. Because that means they really liked it, but there were some things they wanted to be adjusted. But if you are sending out, you know, queries and all you're getting is rejections with no explanation or talking, it's probably not ready. And another thing is to, of course, you can enter contests. There are lots of writing contests. You want to be careful of those. Some writing contests are rip-offs, okay? They're the ones that say, send in $25, the winner's going to win $200. And you get back this letter that says, "Oh, you were so good. You were close. You were like right second place. You would have had it. Make sure you enter again next year." Now, you don't know who won first place and if they ever paid out $200. But if you go through organizations that are well known, like RWA, Romance Writers of America, those are legitimate contests. Those will give you legitimate feedback from judges who have been trained in writing, and those are not rip-offs. And that, so, you know, you got to kind of watch that game just a little bit too. I'm sorry, yeah.
Excuse me, when you submit books like that, novels, whatever, do they send it back to you?
That depends. If you send a self-addressed envelope, so they can just slip it right back in and mail it back to you, then they usually will. If you, however, you never ever want to send your manuscript to a house that doesn't say they'd like to see it. And it's something we were talking about before you came in, but lots of people will just mail their manuscript to this house, and it makes them mad, actually, if you say, because they get so many. So if they say we'd like to see it, then you send that addressed on. Now here's the other drawback. If you're going to resubmit, you shouldn't resubmit that manuscript because it's probably beat up. By the time it goes through the mail in the corner and they turn and they look, and then you're giving that to another editor and it looks like something that, you know, went through the ringer. You always want to look as professional as you can. So it doesn't often help that much. Most of them now take them electronically. They prefer them. A lot of the editors now carry Kindles too, or iPads, and they would rather read there than lug. You know, years ago they used to they literally wore backpacks home from work and they would carry like 6 or 8 manuscripts home, which you can imagine what that would be like on the subway. So most of them are requested electronically. You can still send a hard copy too. Any other questions?
Why do you have trouble finding books at bookstores, like Walmart, Kmart, things like that? Some of them are just like on email or.
Only digital? It just depends on the format that they were produced under. A lot of houses don't even make them in paper. You know, they do only digital. Money, as much as anything else, it's a lot cheaper to the digital book. Yes, ma'am.
Does it ever pay to publish your own book, and then if it's of local interest, and not necessarily any other interest, like the historical information that I mentioned, does it ever pay to take out an ad in the newspaper to sell your book, and then to put it in, tell where they could buy it, and put it in places like a coffee shop, or where artists display things?
I think that probably when you're looking at something that's a local interest, like you're talking about, one of your best bets would probably be to go create space. Like we were talking about, I think, did you get your books back, by the way? Somewhere around the, oh, there, okay, great, but contact the places you think they might sell first. Like, I know you said you had historical about some of the buildings here in town, I guess. If they're a historical society, some of the local restaurants, go in and ask them, you know, could I put 10 books here? You know, or whatever. And get yourself that laid up before you get them printed so that you don't have to outlay a lot of cash. If you're doing through Create Space, and they say, you know, you can go around and talk to them, and they'll say, well, yeah, I'll take 5. And a lot of local businesses will do that. Then you know how many you need to print out. And then, yeah, sure, ads don't hurt local, but you want to keep in mind, you know, what you're going to make out of that, what your cost is going to be in production, and your advertising. if this is a one-time book, if you're not planning on doing a series of books, then you want to be kind of cautious about that too. You know, a lot of authors, particularly in independent publishing, the ones that are making the big money, for those of you that are thinking, you know, I'd kind of like to have a nice new car next week, those are usually fall in certain categories. One is series books. If you write, you know, like, well, Harry Potter's an example, but nobody can write another one of those. But you know, do any of you read books like where you've got, like Jack Reacher novels, you know, or you've got them, oh gosh, that is for 6 years, Harlan Coben novels, where he has a certain character that's in a whole bunch of books, you know? Authors love that. They love that. So if you can do that, if you can write a series of books about suspense books or mysteries or whatever, or sci-fi and things like that, and have your same characters, then when you put them up, you drop your first one real cheap, 99 cents. Some people can give them away free. And then the reader gets hooked to buy the rest of them. And so that's a good way to make a lot of money doing that. Free book downloads aren't as popular as they were when they first started in 2011, gosh, 2 whole years ago. You put up a free book on Amazon and you could have, I mean, my publisher did Texas Hold'em for me back in 2011. I had 60,000 downloads in about 1 week. That doesn't happen anymore. Unless you're a big star, you know, if they offer a well-known book free, yeah. But the average author now, they're lucky if they get, you know, 5,000. So there's so many of them that it's really cut in on that game a lot. But there are all kinds of things you play with. There are different kinds of email groups you can belong to. I belong to one called Indie Romance Inc., and it's all independent authors, and they're romance authors, and there's some on there that are kind of borderline, like Bob Mayer. But they give tips all the time on what they're doing and how it works and whether it's working, and all that's a really great group to belong to ask questions and things like that. A lot of big authors are on there. They're traditionally published and also doing indie publishing now. So it's kind of a good place to hit. Any other questions? Well, I think I've told you everything I know. I'm done now. So if you don't have any other questions, then feel free. I gave you, I think I passed out bookmarks, and I have my website on there. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me. You can go in there and there's a contact me button, and you can do that.
Do you know if some of the big authors like Stephen King and so forth, did they call this regime strictly, or was it before it all took place? Because they've been, you know, writing a long time.
Yeah, and I don't know, I don't think Stephen, does he have any self-published books? Do you know that? Stephen King?
Self-published?
Self-published books?
I think.
I was thinking he put out a short story not long ago.
Yeah.
Most of them were, you know, they've been publishing for a long time. They're with the big houses and happy there, I think. But many of them are starting to jump over. And New York houses are getting nervous. They're losing a lot of their bigger authors because they can do it. They're now starting to think, see, I can get 15% or 70%. You know, and even though, you know, the distribution, of course, is better with the traditional houses. It doesn't
I
take
mean,
too
did they get their agent and?
I'm sure each are different. I don't know the independent stories, but
I didn't know if they were on had a website on the computer, or if computers were before some of their.
I think King's been writing longer than that, really. Because a lot of the earlier books, until the home computer was invented, which was what, the 80s, 90s, where they really got popular, there weren't that many people writing books because you had to do it on a typewriter, and it was hard. And even doing revision. So once the home computer came out, then everybody started writing because it was easy, and you could delete, and you could add, and you could do this and that, and that's when the market really, I think, got flooded with a lot of authors too. But it gave us a lot more variety, a lot more choice as readers. Pick what you want. You want to read it? You can read it. It's out there somewhere. You want to read it? You can do it. There are going to be some more things that's coming up in this month of April, every Tuesday night. I think the next one is Jules, isn't she?
Actually, there's a switch.
Oh,
We
okay.
had to switch. Poor Sheila had something come up, so she switched with Jules. So next week, Sheila Redling, she's a new one. We've never heard from her here, and she writes some really interesting stuff. I would call it sci-fi. Is the best, you know, big bucket I can put it into. And she's going to be here next week. She's going to be talking about finishing up your novel and how to tie up all those loose ends. And then the following week is going to be Jules. and she's gonna be talking about getting your book started, how to plan it and plot it out.
And I would recommend that, really, to go to those, because there is a lot more to it than the average person would think so. Anything else that you want to tell?
No, just come on back.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming out. I hope you got something out of it that was helpful. So something